Keir Starmer has announced that British troops will be sent to Ukraine if a peace deal is reached. Keir Starmer has said he is prepared to put British troops on the ground in Ukraine if there is a deal to end the war with Russia, acknowledging it could put UK forces in harm's way if Vladimir Putin launches another attack. It is understood to be the first time the Prime Minister has explicitly stated he is considering deploying British peacekeepers to Ukraine. The comments came just before emergency talks with the European leaders in Paris on Monday. The leaders will aim to devise a strategy in response to Donald Trump's push for a deal with the Russian president and to fears the US will reduce its defence commitments in Europe. Now, I'm sorry to say, but this seems utterly ridiculous to me. Look, I know people have criticised some of my takes on Ukraine because I said, look, I'm okay with aid being sent to Ukraine, all right? But my red line has always been no boots on the ground. Now, look, this isn't a fight. I think this should be in our sort of behalf. We shouldn't be sending British troops over because I don't think they act as peacekeepers, right? Surely we should have non-partisan peacekeepers. Surely that's appropriate, not British troops. Sarah, just want your initial sort of response to this. What do you think about Keir Starmer sending or saying he's going to be sending British troops to Ukraine?
Like for what? And I think I echo the same stance as you. I think this kind of does send shivers down my spine because you're doing it to gain what? You want people to like you. You want to show that, like, I don't understand the incentive behind it. And I think to understand the gravity of Starmer's position, one has to first grasp the wider imperialist dynamics at play. The Russian invasion of Ukraine is not, as the more vulgar apologists of Putin would have it, an anti-imperialist struggle against Western encroachment, but it's an imperialist venture in and of its own right. If you put boots on the ground in Ukraine, how's Putin going to react to this? Because the continuation of centuries-old project of Russian expansionism has literally sought to dominate in its periphery through coercion and through force, and they've shown that Putin is doing that, and Putinism is going to excel in that. So I think when we think of like the Tsarist subjugation of Poland, and then looking at the Soviet invasions of Hungary and Czechoslovakia, Russian power has actually always rested on the violent suppression of those seeking autonomy. So Starmer doing this, I don't see why we're getting our military involved in Ukraine. And actually, I think it's Starmer trying to posit himself as some altruistic actor, where it's like, I'm doing what I can. We're so brave. Look at us go. It's ridiculous.
Well, I mean, yeah, to speak to that last bit you just said, Keir Starmer has done nothing domestically for people. Right?
At all.
I mean, the Labour's domestic policy is atrocious. What he really enjoys is globetrotting and speaking to leaders. Oh, look at me. I'm a proper global statesman. I don't know how good that accent was.
That was good.
But his favourite place to go and the person to speak to is Zelensky. I mean, he did that 100 deal with Zelensky. I'm sorry, but fucking ridiculous. Yeah. He loves doing this. Look, okay, to do the devil's advocate argument, people are saying because the US have sort of, it looks like they've kind of ripped up the commitment to either NATO or Ukraine, and the US being sort of the big safeguard against Russia. I mean, it didn't stop Russia from invading Ukraine. That we need to be a bit more hawkish and we need to boost our defense on Ukraine. I'm throwing that out there to you. What would you say in response to that?
I personally I can't back it. Like, I think the British state does not engage in military interventions for the cause of democracy or freedom. I think it does so in pursuit of its own geopolitical interests, whether securing energy supplies or reinforcing NATO's hegemony. But if British troops were to be deployed in Ukraine, let's just entertain it. I don't think it would be in service of any sort of liberation, but as pawns in an increasingly dangerous game of escalation between nuclear powers. And I think it would be a direct confrontation between Britain and Russia. So I do think that it would kind of make Starmer look more like an idiot, to be honest. Like, you're trying to position yourself on the global sphere, but it's grotesque. Because I think we were having this conversation earlier, if we were to make this comparison with how he kind of had this steadfast refusal to make any meaningful action on Gaza, he offered only the empty, like, platitudes of a man who values his proximity to power more than he does human life. And I think that is proving relevant again here with Ukraine. It just feels like an impulsive decision. And I don't know if that answered your question.
Well,
But
yeah, I mean, it does. You certainly pointed out the hypocrisy among the liberal elite. I mean, I would say the right wing elite as well. All of the
yeah,
establishment really when it
agreed.
comes to foreign policy, which is that fuck Gaza, but also we're going to send all our support to Ukraine. And there's clearly a contradiction here.
Mm,
I think. Look, I can't understand why he announced this when a deal hasn't been reached. And the policy is send troops to Ukraine when a deal has been reached to keep the peace, right? But why would you announce this before a deal has been reached? I mean, don't you think this is going to make a peace deal less likely? Because Putin's going to go, well, I'm not going to do a deal because if we make this deal, Western allies are going to send their troops at the border.
agreed.
So whether you agree with this policy or not, surely the timing of this is utterly stupid.
It's so stupid. And I think it highlights contradictions in, like you were mentioning earlier, Starmer's foreign policy, that also reflect the contradictions of the British state itself. So it kind of makes us look like a bit of a joke. So if forever, I think it will forever be eager to participate in wars that serve NATO interests, regardless of the human cost. But when presented with an atrocity in which Britain has direct complicity, its political class will equivocate, delay, and obscure. And so it's not pragmatism. I think it's cowardice dressed as diplomacy. And I think that's what Starmer's kind of positing himself as. Britain should not be escalating the war in Ukraine, nor should it be aiding, obviously, Israel's destruction of Gaza. But in terms of Ukraine, we should not be directly getting involved. We should be calling it out for the atrocities that are happening. But like you said as well, if no deal is there, why are you just playing with fire? Why? You know what Putin's like. Like Putin, with all due respect, seems like some impulsive, authoritarian, tyrannical leader. Like I'm not one to want to fuck around with Putin. So how are you protecting the interests of British people when you make decisions like this?
I'm sorry, but I feel like this risks escalation directly
It
between the
does.
UK and Russia. It's not our war. They are our allies, absolutely, right? And look, I am largely a non-interventionist, right? I think that we should have military intervention when it comes to, okay, Israel-Palestine, because that to me is not a war. That's a 75-year occupation, right? You've got over 100,000 Palestinians killed, murdered by Israel. That's a genocide, right? You had the Rwandan genocide. I think it's good to have military intervention to stop essentially this superpower against an oppressed sort of community, country, right? And of course, Ukraine does have the West behind it, closely linked with NATO, probably will be in NATO soon. It's a different context. I feel sympathy for the Ukrainians, of course I do, but I don't think we should be getting ourselves involved, boots on the ground, when I don't think it's our war. I mean, isn't that how sort of huge global conflicts happen in the first place, when allies start jumping in and getting involved?
Completely agree with you, and I think in an era of what's proving to be reckless Western Berkmanship, I think this is Starmer's latest, obviously, gambit, but I think it's one that places the UK on the precipice of a catastrophe, and I think a direct confrontation between Britain and Russia, however unintentional it may initially be, I think would carry risks so grave that even the most hawkish of Cold War strategists would have balked at the prospect. So I think the lessons that we can learn from Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya, it's not just that Western intervention does not bring peace, but that it deepens conflicts and it leaves devastation in its wake. So I think it's not a well thought out plan, and that's what I want to criticize. It just feels impulsive. It doesn't feel like it's happening at a correct time when no deal has been made currently. I think that there are ways of going about something in a delicate manner. And maybe delicacy isn't what's needed when dealing with Putin. But I also don't think that a direct confrontation with Putin is anything that's going to be beneficial to us as well. And then, lo and behold, I really genuinely do think that if this does happen and some war wages between Britain and Russia, people are going to say, but why did you get involved in the first place? Ukraine wasn't our war. It wasn't our war. And people are going to be so pissed off. All the money that's being wasted on this, that, and the other.
Especially when they have committed £3 billion a year. Right?
Yeah.
They're looking at increasing military spending. And they're saying they're going to use it with austerity, i.e. cuts to welfare. And they're coming after disabled people. So to stand and say, we are going to make lives for those on welfare, disabled people, even harder, so we can send money and put troops. It's going to cost money to put troops over there. who then were putting troops in harm's way. I mean, how does this look optically when you've got... What if our troops does get harmed by Russian forces? How's that going to look? Look, there's a difference of opinion, I think, among people at Turn Left, which is fine. But for me, this doesn't make any sense. I do think it's escalation. I don't think it means, oh, there could be a direct war with UK and Russia. But I think that the establishment has gotten foreign policy wrong so many damn times. Why are we doing the same things over and over? I completely sympathise with the idea when people say, well, what part of Britain would you give up? But the difference is, if that's a direct war with Britain, you're going to fight back, which is why we support Ukraine's fighting back against Russia. It's why I'm okay for arms and aid to be sent to them. I mean, okay, I feel gross about it with arms and stuff, but I get it. But I don't think we should have boots on the ground. I think it's very simple. I think it's very simple. I don't know if you had any more to say to that or not.
No, I do agree. And obviously I will always wholeheartedly critique and completely criticize Russian imperialism, because what's happening in Ukraine is absolutely heinous and abhorrent. And I don't want people to think that I'm not wanting this war in Ukraine to end. I absolutely do. I just don't think that this is a logical way of doing it. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's why I criticise, I believe it's Article 5 of NATO, which is basically attack on one and attack us all. I mean, I think it's supposedly a deterrent. I mean, that's the point of it, but it makes me very, very nervous. The last thing I want is global conflicts.
Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn Left.